Good afternoon. My name is Ken Walker. I am president of the Leisure World Historical Society. This is our second meeting for the community as a whole. We anticipate that there will be many similar meetings in the years that lie ahead. I should like to begin by recognizing certain groups that have helped us in arranging this program. Secure Horizons is responsible for providing the refreshments. The Leisure World Healthcare Center was responsible for making available the mementos for those of you who have resided here for 30 years. We wish to thank the American Legion for having representatives help us keep you in order so that we may perform properly. And I'd also like to thank Bill Narang, who will speak later, who has been so helpful in assisting us in getting these mementos arranged. Let me briefly comment on the Historical Society. We are a young organization, just about 2 years old. We are not clear as to all the things that we might do in the years ahead. We have been very pleased by the evidence of interest and support in the community. I do want to mention certain things we do in particular at the present moment, and that we will continue to do. One, we are establishing an archive for documents, others than the official materials that are available in this community. Included in this will be oral histories of individuals, particularly the old-timers who live here, to put in the archives so that they will be perpetuated and can be used when people want to recall our past for a variety of reasons. We also intend, as the mood occasion arises, to have continuing programs for the community as a whole related to the past of this organization. At the moment, there are tables over to my left. On one are mementos of the occasion for the individuals who have resided here for 30 years, with their names inscribed on the memento. At the table facing this way is my wife, the secretary. We are very anxious to get the names of to secure the names of all individuals who have resided here, who came in before December 31st, 1964. You have a list of those names. If you know of a person who has resided here during that period whose name is not on the list, if you would give it to Claire, the secretary, we would appreciate this very much. There is no such record, and we would like it complete for our archives and for the use of people in the future. The Historical Society charges no dues. You are all welcome to join. Whether you join or not, we do have certain expenses, and we welcome contributions. Also at the table is our treasurer, Howard Rolfe, and he would be willing to accept a contribution to it if you are so moved. We have at the present moment identified 170 individuals who have resided here more than 30 years. There may be a few more, but that is a goodly number indeed. And 11 of you, believe it or not, are couples. This is an astounding record. This occasion, in honor of those of you who have resided here for so long, is one in which we try to recall the past and the contribution you have made to the creation of the community that the rest of us are enjoying. I thought that I might read from 2 documents to illustrate what I think your life here has meant not only to you, but to the community as a whole. The first is a letter from Ross Cortese that most of you early arrivals received. I do not know whether you remember it or not, but I think the rest of us would enjoy hearing what he had to say. I was going to address you as dear pioneer, for this is truly what you are. You and your fellow residents are the ones who saw the vision. You were the people who were the first to participate in this remarkable new way of life. To be a pioneer takes a special kind of faith, courage, and self-reliance, and you have been blessed with these qualities in full measure. Leisure World Seal Beach was the first. It is you who made it successful. Whatever our disagreements with Ross Cortese, he did have a vision, and you and he shared it fully. Now the next is a document that is called The Ballad of Leisure World. It was written by Dr. Don Paulin Solkowitz in 1989. It refers not to us, but our sister institution down the road in Laguna Hills. But it does refer to you even more, I think, than to the people at Laguna Hills, because you were the first. It is a ballad. Fortunately for you, I do not have the music, so you don't have to listen to me sing it. But I think that it, in a way, a light way, does reflect those early days when you came. I'll read the refrain first and then a number of verses. They came to California. The flags they were unfurled. They came to Orange County, to a place called Leisure World. Some folks came from Washington. Some folks came from Maine. Some folks had a few small doubts, but they came here just the same. They came to find the sunshine, to live and play in peace, a place where they could walk at night along the quiet streets. But the pioneers of Leisure World, who had the guts to carry, they stood together through it all, and they did learn to share. They shared the clubhouse and the pool. They worked and laughed and played. They built some churches, temple too, and bowed their heads and prayed. The folks of Leisure World, they scoffed at those who called them old. They volunteered to help the sick, and Meals on Wheels were rolled. They formed their clubs, played bridge or golf, and on the dance floor twirled. No old fogies could be found down here in Leisure World. They stayed active, they stayed young, and learned one simple trait. The secret of this Leisure World is just cooperate. So here's to you, my Leisure World. Long may you remain under the California sun and under the golden rain. This is what I hope you remember, and this is what the rest of us should learn to appreciate. Now I should like to turn over the podium to Bill Narang, who will have a few remarks and introduce the speaker.
Thank you, President Walker, and ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Williams, and also Mr. McCurdy, who is in the audience, President of the Golden Rain Foundation. It is indeed a great pleasure of mine that I have had the opportunity for the last 15 years to be a party to your success in providing affordable, clean, good housing for residents of Leisure World and Seal Beach, but above all for those people who have chosen this community to live here 32 years ago. Yes, indeed, your vision and Mr. Cortez's desire to build a partnership between the government and the private sector and have that partnership top it off with the people who live here to have the opportunity to run their own affairs in a successful living environment is a clear living example by many of you who have lived for the last 30 years in this community. My professional career for almost 25 years, when I came to know about Seal Beach Leisure World in 1970, when I was working for Fannie Mae, was a beautiful girl. Fannie Mae was Federal National Mortgages Association, who provided the funding for building this community, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, who provided the guarantees for the loans. Since then, I have learned to love this community, and my luck had it back in 1979, I became directly involved in having the opportunity to serve the Golden Rain Foundation and its 6,608 shareholders with a management experience for this community. I can share with you that this community, under the direction of the Golden Rain Foundation and under the directions of the elected mutual directors, which are hundreds in numbers, and many of you who are here this afternoon have served in that capacity. Original Golden Rain board members who sought and succeeded in letting everyone know that you are going to decide how you're going to maintain and run this community. And yes, you have succeeded very well. A clear example of success of a government-assisted project with public participation and private participation, how well housing can be provided for so many residents in this community. The Leisure World Historical Society, under the direction of your membership into this group, has made it so possible to recognize all of those people who have been living here for 30 years. Golden Rain Foundation and the mutual corporations indeed have sought their lifestyle through management, through control, through decision-making process. And this afternoon it is indeed great pleasure of mine to have you hear some background information about this community, how it was developed in 1962, and what went on from an historical point of view. I want you to know that this gentleman that I have known now for 15 years has indeed represented and clearly demonstrated that he is willing to do for what you want this community to be. It has been your decision, it has been your desire how you want this community to be and what you want to run this community. He has represented you and provided you the vehicle to operate under your direction. He is representing the law firm of Price, Russell and Williams. He's been your general counsel for the last almost 32 years now. He's been involved and brought in by the residents who are sitting in this audience. Many of you have known him, how he has operated and given you the direction that you need to run your affairs. Would you please all join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narang. President Walker, members of the Historical Society, I appreciate being here today and thank you for inviting me. I only want to correct one thing Mr. Narang said. My firm's name is Price, Williams and Russell. Pray and Price are gone, so that makes me the head guy of that place now. It wasn't that way though always. I started, before I really give you any of the history, let me say this. I have left, as far as the history is concerned, no axes to grind. I will gloss over some of the things that happened because there's no need of bringing those to the surface again. We have a great harmonious community at this time. But I am going to let you have a real insight into what was happening more than 30 years ago when I started representing the residents of Leisure World. And that's one of the things that I think I'd like to clarify because there's so much working together here that my firm and I have never represented anyone here except Golden Rain and the members of Golden Rain Foundation. We've represented no one else insofar as the operation of Leisure World is concerned. Our direction comes from you, and as Mr. Narang pointed out, our scope and our direction at all times in the representation of the residents of Leisure World and the members of the Golden Rain Foundation has been upon their declaring to me what they wanted to do, so that everything that we do and every position we take has been for the residents. I started, this kind of an anniversary this month because I started working, the first meeting I had for the residents at Leisure World Seal Beach was November 16th, 15th or 16th of 1963 in my office, and at that time I was in the security building downtown Long Beach. And the man who came to see me later became a director of the Golden Rain Foundation, and I don't know if any of you remember him, was Mr. Les Dryce. Les Dryce had been a resident of Long Beach, and I knew him when he was living there. He was a retired policeman, a sergeant from the Long Beach Police Department, and he and his wife, Vita, decided to move to Leisure World. I knew, and as everyone around here knew, about Leisure World and it's happening. And I saw the tractors out here and the land levelers, and I read about it in the newspaper, and it sounded like a really good deal. At that time, it was $10,000 to $12,000 to buy one of the units, and it would cost you about $1,000 down. That's a fantastic thing, and it still is. It still is here. This, as far as PR is concerned, I'm one of the greatest PR people that there can be for Leisure World Seal Beach. I've talked many, many people into moving out here because I think you live in an island of life that is so good and so pure insofar as economics are concerned and the way you live, and it's by choice. Well, as indicated, Mr. Cortese was a guiding light of this, and he was a brilliant man for having achieved this, and after having built Rossmore, he had new horizons to conquer, and this was the beginning of it here at Seal Beach as far as senior citizen communities were concerned. It was planned at that time to have the one at Walnut Creek, this one, the one at Laguna Hills, one in New Jersey, and also one in Switzerland. And these were things that were general knowledge at that time, and these were brilliantly executed. one of the reasons, probably all of you figured out, why you have mutual corporations was the fact that there was some reticence in belief as to how successful this might be. And this project was built in stages, and those stages are the mutual corporations. And each one was separately financed, each one had separate guarantors on the loans, each one has separate mortgage parcels, and these were built, as I say, in stages, and the last one was finished with Mutual 15, except for 17, but 15 was at that time the last one, and completed about 1965. Well, as I say, the difficulty, and there was a serpent in paradise. The difficulty that Mr. Dryce gave to me was the residents here felt that the structure of Leisure World was such that it was supposed to be a democratic society, and that the residents should have some say-so in how they operated it, and it was his belief, and he said, he conveyed to me at that time, his belief and the belief of others, that they really didn't have anything to say about what was going on. And they had some problems at that time with the administrator. The administrator at that time was a Mr. Letson. And well, I said, you know, I love Mr. Dryce and his wife, and I said, but how can you undertake anything because one person out of thousands appears to be unhappy? And he said, well, it's not just me. He says, there are others, and I'd like you to meet them. And I said, okay, well, have some of the other people come and I'll meet with them. Well, he says, to start with, we don't have any money for this concept. And I said, well, let's see what we do about that. So the next meeting we had was a couple of weeks later, and there were about 10 people came to the meeting, and I had them in my conference room, and they came up with the same thing, that they didn't feel that they were self-governed, self-ruled, and that the members of the Golden Rain Foundation Board were not people that the residents had selected. We talked about it, and they said, we have more people now that we've learned about you, Mr. Williams. We have more people that would like to talk to you about it, and we'd like to have another meeting, but we think there will be so many residents from Leisure World there, your office isn't going to handle them all. And we have arranged with Seal Beach, the City Council of Seal Beach, to use the City Council chambers. And would you meet with us in a week down there, and we'll have some other people. Well, at that meeting, there were 70 or 80 people. And the one thread that went through this all the time, we don't have any money, so I don't know how we're going to pay you for helping us. And we discussed the problems, and they said, can you help us? Because we wish to achieve, and it sounds like the American Revolution, we wish to achieve that we have self-governance, that we vote on and select the members of the Golden Rain Foundation and the mutuals, and that we have some say about who's the administrator of Leisure World. In other words, that we have the right to be self-governing. Well, there was another little flaw in all this ointment, and that was at that time FHA, because this whole project was really a new experiment. FHA at that point was not totally convinced that senior citizens had the ability to govern themselves, nor did they have the ability to select an administrator. So the next meeting I had at the City Council with the people from Leisure World was about, and I have to guess these days now, but about the middle of December of 1963. And so they said, at that point, have you heard enough, and will you help us, and will you pursue this by way of litigation for whatever we have to do? And we don't have any money. And I said, I will. I said, I'll do this. If any of you can make a contribution to a fund, I will keep a record of how much time we spent on this and what the attorney's fees are. If you can pay them, fine. If not, why, if we're successful and you people are on the Golden Rain Board, maybe you'll hire me as your lawyer. And one said, and I guarantee you, I don't believe you're committed to this, one said, if you win this for us, we'll hire you to be our lawyer for the rest of your life. It looks like maybe that's what it turned out. But as I said, you're not bound to that. Well, I started then a blueprint, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground now. I started a blueprint for them as to how to achieve the control that they wanted and how to achieve self-rule. And we worked on that for the next few months, and this resulted in the board meeting in June of 1964 of our people being elected and gaining every seat on the Golden Ring Foundation board except for one. Our people from these groups from the very beginning achieved that. Well, now they say we'd like to have a place where, and now understand, that doesn't mean that we all, ipso facto, all of a sudden, we have everyone agreed, we run this place through this board, because FHA didn't quite like that idea, and Mr. Cortese didn't like that idea too much, nor did some of the people that he had hired. And about that time, or shortly thereafter, apparently a lot of people retired from the FBI because he hired those people to work here and to go into what was known as the National Golden Rain Foundation. And it was the intention, I think, I have to guess, but it was the intention for the National Golden Rain Foundation to govern not only Seal Beach Leisure World, but Laguna Hills, Walnut Creek, and every leisure world. This one national organization would govern them all. Maybe it was a good idea, maybe not, but they didn't think it was a good idea here, and they didn't want the National Golden Rain Foundation to be running this place. So we had this situation. We had the Golden Rain Foundation with the people, the residents that we had been able to have elected onto the board, who were our real, your Golden Rain Foundation, and at the same time we had the National Golden Rain Foundation with these other people trying to run a leisure world. A conflict. And so this conflict then came to the attention. I should follow my notes. I've got a lot of notes, and this stuff just flows out my head because it's like yesterday. We had a conflict, and FHA didn't like that idea, and we were threatening litigation in the state court here over the fact that we, under the governing documents, we had a right to amend them, we had a right to interpret them, and we had a right to do whatever is necessary to run this place, and we didn't have to make a contract with the National Golden Rain Foundation to run this place. That the board actually had the right to select an administrator for the operation of Leisure World. Well, FHA, as I say, they weren't thrilled with this concept, and they were here frequently. They came down here weekly. They had a helicopter come in, and they'd walk around, look sour and glum. And here was maybe an experiment going awry was the problem, because of the commitment that they had made. Obviously, these people were sold on the concept that Mr. Cortese had given them, and they felt he was more able to handle all this and to run it than were the people at Leisure World. Finally, they agreed that they would permit us to select an administrator. But before that, the Golden Rain Board, in order to have a place, and actually, if there was anyone here who should be telling you a lot of this, it's Ethel Amos who's sitting down here, because she knows more history and remembers more than I do. And Paul Snow has researched, gone back through all the records and researched this, and he can give you a lot. But we at that time said we want a place, and we're still having to deal with the Golden Rain Foundation operated by the developer. We want a place to meet. There's no place here to meet for this board. They aren't doing anything for us. So we took an apartment, one of the apartments here at Leisure World, over near the entrance and across the street, or just about across the street, from Clubhouse 1. If you notice, there's a parking lot there on the end beyond the east end of the golf course, and there's some apartments that face on that parking lot. And on the end apartment, facing west, next to the street, that was the Golden Rain Board office. And they said, well, now, what do we do about you, Mr. Williams? All this work for this many, many months that we've had, we haven't paid you. The collections didn't run high. And we haven't paid you, so why don't we have you come out here one day a week to help us? That lasted about a month because you don't need somebody here one day a week. You don't need someone here for one day a month. You need someone when you need them and only then, and shouldn't have to pay them for any other time. And that's what we finally decided. I'd like to tell you before I move on, and I'm going to have to move on faster than I am because I've been told you don't want to stay all afternoon. But I'd like to tell you one thing that happened. There was a wonderful man who lived here and who was on the board, the first board of directors that was elected by the residents. And all these men were wonderful. Someday, if you're in the board office, you can see the photographs of some of them on the wall who became chairman. One was Lloyd Gamere, and Lloyd Gamere never did become chairman of the board, probably by choice. But I don't think anyone would question the fact that he really was the leader of the loyal opposition here. Mr. Grice was the one who said, I think I'd like to talk to a lawyer only because he knew one. And he said, Lloyd Gamere, though, he fell into this quickly. And he obviously was one of the real leaders of this group. And he worked incessantly upon this concept of being able to have the residents select the board. And he and I talked on the telephone almost daily, and he would call me at home sometimes in the evening. And we would talk about the various problems. And one day he called me, and he said, I have a problem. I don't know how to tell you about it. Maybe we could talk about it tomorrow. He says, or will you be home the rest of the evening? And I said, yes. He said, well, if I have a chance, I'll call you later tonight. So he called me about 15 minutes later, and he says, I'm at a pay telephone. I'm over at the shopping center. He says, there's something funny going on with my television set. And I said, well, what is it? And he says, every time I pick up the phone, it goes all fuzzy. And I put the phone down, and it's clear. And I said, oh, I had some experience from a legal standpoint with wiretaps. And I said, well, let's call the police. So we did. We called the chief of police of Seal Beach. And they sent an investigative team out here. And they knew that there had to be a listening post somewhere near Mr. Gamere's house. They drove through the project, and they found a panel truck parked about 2 blocks from Mr. Gamere's house, and caught 2 men in there with the listening equipment for the device that had been installed at Mr. Gamere's home. They were arrested, and if I recall correctly, they pled guilty. I'm sure they pled guilty to something and made some kind of deal, but this was the atmosphere. Another thing with Mr. Gamere that happened, because he was well identified, and this is the last one that I would relate to. There was a big meeting in Clubhouse 3. However many people Clubhouse 3 will hold, that's how many people were there. And the purpose of this meeting was by the existing board of the Golden Rain Foundation before the revolutionaries were elected. And it was really to show what kind of man Mr. Gamere was. They were going to really reveal the type of character he was, and they had learned about a piece of litigation in Santa Barbara County where Mr. Gamere had been a real estate broker, where somebody who was unhappy in a transaction in which he was engaged charged in those pleadings that were filed in court that he had defrauded them. And so there was a lawyer who represented Mr. Cortese, a brilliant man and a big, tall guy. And he and I got along very well, even though we were opposite sides of the fence. His name was Oakley Hunter. I think he might have been your boss later at Fannie Mae, because when he left, he went with the government. And Mr. Hunter said to me, because I was sitting there and I was going to be permitted to speak on behalf of Mr. Gamir after they finished whatever they said they were going to do. And I said, well, didn't you tell them these pleadings don't mean anything? It's what you prove in court, not what you say in the papers, and that's true. You probably all are aware of it. People can say anything they want in papers they file in court. They read this, they read it for 15 or 20 minutes, somebody did, how he defrauded him doing this, he defrauded, and he's a defrauder, this man. Talk about, this meeting was the turning event, I think. In my opinion, it was the turning event that led to the complete success that we had. Because just the day before, in my checking some things at Walnut Creek, I discovered someone had filed a lawsuit against Mr. Cortese. And what do you think they had alleged in that lawsuit? That they had been defrauded, that this and that. I don't, those things aren't true because people put in whatever they want. But they had said that about Mr. Cortese. So when I started talking, I told him, these pleadings from a lawyer's standpoint, Mr. Hunter will agree with me. They don't mean anything. You can't say someone is a fraudulent kind of person just because of what's in a lawsuit. But if you can, here's a lawsuit from, I forget the name of the county where Walnut Creek is, that accuses Mr. Cortese of unseemly conduct also. Well, brought the house down because people they sympathized with Mr. Gamir, but they thought, my God, he's caught. And then it was revealed. These had no meaning either as to Mr. Gamir or as to Mr. Cortese. Well, we had other things that happened. Many of you may not know that when Leisure World first started, there was a medical plan included in your monthly payment. And the medical plan was a great idea, but it just didn't work because the first year of the medical plan at Leisure World, it lost about $1 million. Think of this in 1962 or so. And then the next year it lost $1.5 million. And so there had to be some way to take care of this, so the way to take care of it is stop it. So that ended the medical plan. Things had gotten kind of bad around here about the time that I got here. You could go over to the market in the shopping center, and there were little cards up on a community board. Please take over my payments and you can have my apartment. That's the way it was in those, and people were doing it. They wanted out, and there was no way you couldn't sell it. Because they were still selling new ones, and the people who were in here, some of them were unhappy and wanted to leave. Well, that was the atmosphere, and I tell you, when the residents elected the board, it was like day to night, the change that occurred here. Because we were ultimately able to resolve all of these problems that FHA felt existed and make agreements as to how the administrator would be selected. They determined, though, at that time, that the Golden Rain Board could not directly employ an administrator. They couldn't have an employee because they feared, the FHA feared, that there would be too much political control exercised through the Golden Rain Board as to the administrator, and that he might not do a good job. So what they insisted on, at first they insisted that we just select 3 people, and they would pick one out of that, or they'd let us pick one out of it if these 3 people met with their approval. And that's pretty much what was done. There was another great man, I think, who was on the Golden Rain Board and became really the first president after the revolution. Not called the revolution. That was Dean Campbell. Dean Campbell was a brilliant CPA from Los Angeles who had retired and moved here. And I think Ethel would agree, he was just a great person to know. He felt very bad after what happened, though, because Dean says, I have a friend who is an administrator type. He works for this company, and I think it'd be great. He's my friend. And we could have him here as administrator and get him on the list. He did qualify. And he was selected. Richard Kay was his name. Mr. Kay was only here about a month, and he realized which side of the bread the butter was on. And he didn't work out as far as Mr. Campbell was concerned. Mr. Campbell thought that maybe he'd made a mistake. And so, of course, that played right into the hands of those people who said these people aren't able to handle this themselves, because now they wanted to get rid of Mr. Kay. Well, they let us get rid of him and select someone else, and at that time we selected the J.L. Moyer Company, and Jack Davis became the administrator. Pardon me. We went on that way for many years with the Moyer Company, as you know, and FHA was happy with the way it was going. One of the things that this community has, insofar as facilities are concerned, are all the community facilities that are in the trust. And the Golden Ring Foundation acts as the trustee for all these facilities. Under this plan, some of you have asked for what I think about the future, and I'll get to that. But I have to, because of the passage of time, do a great leap, because we, in doing these things and all the things that were done and the litigation that occurred as to who owned what between GTE, whether or not we were violating what is known as the California Cartwright Act, which is the same as the Sherman Antitrust Act, when we developed the resale office. We were sued over that. Real estate brokers were charging regular real estate commissions for the sale of an apartment, where when the resale office was started, why, it was a charge then of $50 in order to make this sale. And the real estate brokers didn't like that idea. Thank you. Real estate brokers didn't like that idea, and so they filed suit against us. And some of them said, you know, one told me, he said, I'm going to see you in prison, Williams. And at that time, I had a bad habit, I smoked. And he says, and I'm not even going to bring any of those lousy cigarettes. And Dean Campbell was there, and he smoked too. And he says, and I'm not going to bring you any cigarettes either when I get you in prison over this. Well, we didn't go to prison. And the court threw their case out the first day. These are just little things that happened as we went along. Well, Jack Davis, as you know, was the administrator for many years after Mr. Davis became ill, with John Lafferty, and then came Mr. Narang. And Mr. Narang has held that position, really, I guess, just about the same time as Jack Davis, Jim. And it's been an idyllic community, I think, insofar as the way you are, from an economic standpoint, living. There has not been much change over all these years in the economy as to how the economics affect you here at Leisure World. Well, we had one other thing occur that was of great import to Leisure World, and that's when the freeway was built. They had an off-ramp that was going to go down around the northwest corner of Leisure World, and they took a couple of acres of land off there out of Mutual 9 and destroyed about 44 apartments. And we rebuilt those, which are right next to this clubhouse. The other big change that occurred, of course, is when Mutual 17 came on, and it was through the wisdom of the Golden Ring Board at that time to buy that land, and I think I would attribute most of the effort in that regard to Mr. Omohundro, who was your chairman. And they bought that land, we dealt with Presley Company, and got Mutual 17 built. There was a great deal of work with the Department of Corporations and the Real Estate Department in having that achieved. But these are changes that through all these years keep occurring. We made changes in the ability. There was an ability insofar as the stock is concerned only to hold it for probate. And we made changes during that time, starting about 1965, permit non-resident joint tenants so that you could have members of your family who would inherit it rather than have to wait through a probate proceeding. During this time also I incorporated an institution that you're very much familiar with, and that's the Golden Age Foundation. And the Golden Age Foundation was an immediate success because the people who were participants in the organization of it, and when we had it qualified as a charitable corporation, we had our own foundation from a charitable standpoint, which has been very active here at Leisure World. Well, we have had, I realize now that some other time maybe you will let me come out and talk some more about it, because there's so many things that happen, it's impossible to give you a good insight into everything. And I've been asked if I would to refer just for a moment to the future and what is in store for you as to the future. Well, the first thing is when does the future start insofar as Leisure World is concerned? The difficulty with any change occurring of any significance is a very, very strange predicament that exists here that I'll tell you about. A little legal entanglement. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the community facilities are in a trust, and the Golden Rain Foundation is the trustee of that trust. Every street outside of the mutuals, every community facility street, every clubhouse, every sidewalk other than inside the mutuals, the golf course, the swimming pool, all of these things are in the trust. This trust was created for the very purpose of holding these things and letting the Golden Rain Foundation administer it and to keep it up. And to make every resident here a member of the Golden Rain Foundation. Well, the individual members, however, are not the beneficiaries of that trust. The beneficiaries of the trust are the mutual corporations, so that indirectly, of course, it goes to the residents, but through the mutual. So all of the mutual properties are dependent on the community facilities for their existence, insofar as being able to get to, from, and whatever else may happen. A trust under the law, and the law that relates to the trust that's here at Leisure World is a law that comes from back in antiquity, the time of antiquities, and probably around the 1400s in England. And there's a rule called Rule Against Perpetuities. And that rule says you cannot create a trust that lasts forever. If you think about it, and there's a good reason for it, if you put $1 in a trust that can last forever, ultimately that trust will own all the property in the world, just through income and accretions to that $1. So there's a limitation on trust at the time this one was created. They're a little changed now, but not much. The limitation is a trust can go no longer than lives in being at the time of the creation or vesting of the property in the trust, plus 21 years. So who will be the lives in being? And it was decided at the inception of the creation of Leisure World that the lives in being would be all the residents of Mutual One. Maybe you don't know you're used for that. But the Mutual One residents, their life, birth date, and date of decease is kept, a record is kept of it. Because this trust, the Golden Rain Trust, will terminate 21 years plus the period of gestation. 21 years following the date of decease of the last living person from Mutual One who was alive at the time of the creation of the trust, which is about 1961, 60 or 61. I have had from time to time been asked to determine when that would be, and there is no, of course, there is no way. So the guesstimate of it is somewhere near the year 2030 to 2040. So I say that the trust facilities are tied up at Leisure World until that time. Now, and the fear, I think some of you have probably heard the fear. Someone said, well, what if when we pay off the mortgage, and most of these mortgages starting in the year 2001 or 2, and the year 2005 will be paid off. These were 40-year loans, and they'll be paid off. When that happens, of course, the jurisdiction of HUD, which used to be FHA, will end in a governance control that they have here. And they still have it. They don't exercise it much because now they know you can run this place. And they let you. They hardly want us to bother them about anything that's happening here. They understand the management you have is highly qualified and professional, so they leave it alone. Now, we ask them permission for things we know we have to ask about, and they say, why are you bothering us? So that's the status of it now. So in any event, despite that, we still are controlled. In management contracts, for instance, HUD has to approve it, as do the mortgagees. They have to approve these things, and they have a right to notice, and they still have that kind of control. Those controls, of course, will end when the mortgages are paid off during that period I've indicated of 2001 to 2005. When that happens, people have asked me, well, who's going to control our mutual? What if they just tear down the mutual and start building hotels or homes or something like that to sell? And I say, really, there is nothing in the future for you to fear. Because, just think of it for a moment. When I started this, we considered the fact this is a democratic, true democratic society, and that you elect all your representatives, both the Golden Rain Board and the Mutual Board. Nothing is going to happen in your mutual unless the shareholders agree that it's going to happen. But just say something went a little haywire, and somebody had the wisdom to create a group to go in and buy all of the shares of a mutual and say, now we control it. We have only one thing in mind, and that's we're going to tear down the buildings and build homes or something like that. You still have the control of the Golden Rain Foundation as to all the community facilities, including the streets, and including the necessity of the memberships, and including the shares of ownership in the mutual corporation. And it's my belief, I hope to be here in the year 2030 to see what happens. It's my belief that we won't have any great problems starting in the year 2000 when these mortgages are paid off. First, I don't think there could be any problem until they're all paid off, so the earliest of all of them being paid off would be the year 2005. So nothing can happen until then, nothing. And I don't think anything can happen after that, because you have control of it. You will be running it. You, the shareholders of each mutual, will be the ones controlling it. You'll be controlling the Golden Rain Foundation, the mutual corporations, the selection of the administrator, and I know Mr. Narang hopes he's going to be here then too. But I don't think that you have to have any fear concerning the mutuals or the Golden Rain Foundation. The trust can be terminated, as I said, at the guesstimated time, some year in the year 2030s on, and that would probably be the greatest upheaval that could occur as far as the leisure world is concerned, because then the distribution of that trust would be 17 mutual, and Mutual 17 is into that. We made a computation as to the value of the assets at the time Mutual 17 was created. They have contributed their fair share into the trust. So all of the mutual corporations are beneficiaries. And just tell me, what do you suppose is going to happen when 16 corporations, the 16 mutual corporations, are the beneficiaries and distributees of this trust, and so each one says, well, I own a proportionate share of Golden Rain Road. No, the other, say one does that, and the other 15 say yes. So, well, I want my share of Golden Rain Road or St. Andrew's Place. Or I want my, if they don't come out even because of the different sizes, but I want my 1/20th% of the amphitheater. Yes, and what do you intend to do with it? Well, maybe I'll sell it. And so I don't know if you ever heard of partitioning, but in court you can have partitions. But it's such a laborious problem that I think you can add another 10 years to the guesstimate I've given you when people of mutual corporations that might be of that mind start trying to divide out their part of any asset of the trust. The thing I'm trying to tell you, and that I think is without any question, is this. You need, none of us who are here today need have any concern for the future of Leisure World Seal Beach and any changes that could occur. There just won't be any. There's nothing that is going to happen to cause you any trouble or any problems in financing or anything of that nature. The closest semblance will be you'll have a little more freedom starting in the year 2005. You have a little more freedom in the governance of Leisure World Seal Beach. I have, honestly, I have another hour or two someday if you'd like to hear it, but I know I've gone past my welcome today. Thank you very much for your attention to what I've said.
AARP. If there is one issue that is a problem for all retirement communities, it is governance. The relationship of the owners, the management, and the populace. At every national meeting of this organization, they try to figure out what to do. It is pervasive, it is intractable. Very few communities have come close to providing a solution to this problem of governance. It is the retirees, 30 years living here, and Bill Williams that came as close to a solution of that problem as any retirement community has ever found. And we owe them a vote of thanks, those of us who came later. Then in conclusion, might I remind you that mementos are still available. We hope you will pick them up. If anyone wishes to make a contribution to our society, you may do that. And finally, we do plead with you. If you know of anyone who came here before December 31st, 1964, we would like that name so our records are complete. And I want to thank this gracious audience for joining us on this particular occasion.
And there are some cookies, if anybody wants.
Oh yes, there are refreshments as well. The meeting is adjourned.
Your plaque back when, and we'll put it back on the table when you're done. There's another one you're going to pretend you're going to do.
Okay, alrighty. Yeah, see they have the name, Margaret Daniels. It's on the end. That's the names of the people that have been here 30 years.
We get the one for your name. I know all of that, I know that. It's for the television.
Yeah.
And you pretend you're taking it away.
Oh, hi there.
You walk off with it.
Let me see her.
Virginia, well, congratulations, Virginia. Here is your thing, and you're on camera.
Beautiful. I was sitting right next to the
Oh, yeah.